On December 7, 1941, more than 300 Japanese Navy fighter planes launched a surprise attack on the United States Pacific Fleet base at Pearl Harbor. There was no warning. In just 2 hours, 20 American warships were reduced to scrap, 300 aircraft were destroyed, and more than 2,400 military personnel and civilians lost their lives. The sleeping giant had been awakened. 4 years later, the United States played the role of Santa Claus, delivering a special gift to Japan for the misbehaving children. 2 nuclear bombs, carefully wrapped and dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastating blow shook Japan to its core. It wasn't just the samurai who trembled. This was a message to the entire world. Don't be foolish enough to mess with America. After everything that had happened, people believed no one and no force would ever dare threaten the United States again. But deep in the terrorist training camps of Afghanistan, the desire to strike back at the world's most powerful country, due to its presence in the Middle East, had never died out. With a vast network in over 40 countries, and driven by a violent revolutionary ideology meant to spread fear around the globe, these men, wearing turbans and false devotion, entered the United States, fully prepared, using America's own pride in commercial aviation against it. They turned Boeing jets into missiles, destroying iconic buildings and plunging the U.S. into the darkest day in its history. Yes, we're talking about September 11th. That morning, September 11th, seemed like any other ordinary day. The sky was clear, and the people of New York City were going about their lives, breathing safely under what was considered the most secure skies on Earth. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a man named Mohammed Atta called bin al-Shib and said, "Our plan is ready. 4 targets, 4 flights. The flights chosen were American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, American Airlines Flight 77, and United Airlines Flight 93. 7:00 a.m., Logan International Airport, Boston, USA. Mohammed Atta and his associate Abdulaziz Al-Omari arrived after taking a connecting flight from Maine. At the airport, they met 3 more terrorists, Walid al-Shehri, Wael al-Shehri, and Satam al-Sukami. All 5 passed through security checkpoints without issue and boarded American Airlines Flight 11 as passengers. There were a total of 81 people on board. Flight 11 was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles International Airport, operated by a Boeing 767. The flight crew included 11 members: Captain John Oganowski, age 50, First Officer Thomas McGuinness, age 42, a former Navy fighter pilot. 7:59 a.m., the wide-body jet took off from runway 4R. At 8:13:29 a.m., while cruising over Massachusetts at 26,000 feet, the pilots received instructions from Boston Air Traffic Control. American 11, turn right 020. American 11, climb and maintain FL 350. But then, no response. Something was wrong. 8:13 a.m., from seat 8D in business class, Mohammed Atta gave the signal. The terrorists used makeshift weapons to attack the crew. 2 flight attendants were injured. A male passenger named Daniel Lewin was stabbed. They forced their way into the cockpit. Atta and Al-Omari overpowered the captain and first officer, taking control of the plane. In the cabin, the other 3 hijackers forced passengers to the back and threatened them with what they claimed was a bomb. 8:16 a.m. 2 minutes after the hijacking, the plane leveled off at 29,000 feet and then began veering off its intended flight path. Sounds of screaming were picked up by Boston Air Traffic Control's phone lines. They knew something terrible was unfolding. 8:21 a.m., the aircraft's transponder signal, Mode C, was turned off. 8:23 a.m., ATC sent urgent messages. Good morning. ATC is looking for you on 135.32. Please contact Boston Center ASAP. No response. Inside the cabin, flight attendants Amy Sweeney and Betty Ong tried desperately to call for help. This is Betty, flight attendant on Flight 11. I think we're being hijacked. Possibly no cockpit contact. First-class passengers. 2 flight attendants injured. We can't get into the cockpit. The door is closed. 8:24:38 a.m. Atta accidentally made a transmission intended for the cabin, but it was received by Boston Air Traffic Control. Nobody move. Everything will be okay. We are returning to the airport. Just stay quiet. 8:26 a.m. The plane sharply turned south at high speed. 8:33:59 a.m. Another announcement from Atta. We are heading back to the airport. Don't do anything foolish. 8:37 a.m. Air Traffic Control contacted United Airlines Flight 175, which was following a similar path to Flight 11 and had been airborne for 23 minutes, cruising at 33,000 feet. United 175. Do you have visual on American 11? We see them. They're at 29,000 feet. Thanks. Turn right 30 degrees to avoid. Shortly after, around 8:43 a.m., Flight 175's pilots reported strange radio chatter coming from Flight 11. But their call had barely ended when another group of hijackers, already on board Flight 175, stormed the cockpit and killed the captain and first officer. The lead hijacker, Marwan al-Sheikhi, who had received formal pilot training, took control of the aircraft. Meanwhile, back on Flight 11, Atta completed his final approach toward Manhattan. The aircraft flew low at 710 km/h, shocking even the cabin crew. At 8:46 a.m., the massive Boeing 767 slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center between floors 93 and 99. Everyone on board died instantly. Many inside the building were also killed. The jet fuel, over 10,000 gallons, exploded, setting the tower ablaze. Nearly 1,000 people were trapped. Dozens jumped from the upper floors. Unable to bear the smoke and heat, breaking news flooded every American TV network. Some reporters mistakenly identified the aircraft as a small twin-engine jet, unaware of the gaping hole left behind. This misinformation was relayed to President George W. Bush, who was visiting an elementary school in Florida. The White House initially assumed pilot error was to blame. Evacuations began at both towers, but most still believed it was just an accident, unaware that the next blow was moments away. After seizing control of Flight 175, the hijackers veered off its designated route, a movement detected by the New York Air Traffic Control Center. Controllers tried repeatedly to contact the flight crew, but there was no response. Inside the cabin, terrified passengers and flight attendants began calling their families and the airline. 8:52 a.m. A male flight attendant named Robert Fangman called United Airlines maintenance office in San Francisco to report the hijacking. The call lasted 1 minute and 15 seconds before being cut off. The aircraft's communication systems received a warning message. We have received reports of an incident on your aircraft. Please confirm everything is okay. Realizing their cover was blown, the hijackers grew increasingly frantic. The plane narrowly avoided a mid-air collision with Delta Airlines Flight 2315. At the ground station, an air traffic controller named Dave Bottiglia attempted to reroute Flight 175, but failed. Instead, the hijacked plane accelerated and headed straight for Delta 2315. In the final moments, Delta 2315 swerved just in time, avoiding a disaster by mere seconds. 8:52 a.m. A passenger named Peter Hansen called his father. He was traveling with his wife and their 2-year-old daughter, the youngest passenger on board. "Dad, things are really bad. A flight attendant's been stabbed. They've got knives and a bomb. Everyone's terrified. The plane's jerking around. I think we're going down. I think they're going to crash into a building. Don't worry, Dad. If it happens, it'll be quick." 8:58 a.m. Flight 175 flew over New Jersey at 28,500 feet, heading for New York City. In just 5 minutes, it accelerated rapidly while descending sharply. At 9:03 a.m., flying at 800 km/h, the Boeing 767 slammed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, between floors 77 and 85. A huge fireball erupted. Dark smoke filled the sky. The attacks by 2 separate aircraft on both towers led to the collapse of all 7 buildings in the World Trade Center complex. The United States had finally awakened. President George W. Bush addressed the nation from the Pentagon saying, "We are experiencing a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country." After the second attack, American Airlines suspended all flights nationwide. Calls flooded in from Indianapolis Air Traffic Control and airline staff trying to contact Flight 77, which had taken off at 8:20 a.m. from Dulles International Airport in Northern Virginia, bound for Los Angeles. They received no response. Why? Because Flight 77 was already under the hijackers' control. The perpetrators were 5 Saudi Arabian men, led by Hani Hanjour, who had obtained a U.S. commercial pilot license in 1999. At 8:51 a.m., they stormed the cockpit and overpowered the crew in just 3 minutes. They quickly turned the aircraft off course near Ohio, shut off the transponder, and activated autopilot, redirecting the flight toward Washington, D.C. Their new target, the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. Between 9:17 and 9:22 a.m., Hanjour used the plane's public address system to speak to passengers. "The plane has been hijacked. Do not resist. We are returning to the airport. Everyone will be safe if our demands are met." 9:29 a.m., he switched off autopilot and took manual control. The aircraft descended rapidly, moving at 850 km/h. At 9:37 a.m., just 800 meters from its target, the Boeing 757 performed a tight 330-degree spiral at low altitude, leveling off at 670 meters. Then, with full throttle, it crashed into the western side of the Pentagon. All 64 people on board were killed instantly. 125 more inside the Pentagon lost their lives. Following the Pentagon strike, U.S. airspace was entirely shut down. No aircraft were allowed to fly. But one plane remained in the sky, defying all orders. That plane was United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757, the 4th hijacked jet in the terrorists' coordinated attack. Due to delays at the airport, Flight 93 didn't take off until 8:42 a.m., departing from Newark International Airport in New Jersey, bound for San Francisco, California. People later said, "If only the flight had been delayed a few minutes more, perhaps the outcome would have been different." There were 37 passengers on board, including 4 hijackers, led by Ziad Jarrah. The flight crew included 4 members, with Captain Jason Dull and First Officer Leroy Homer. 9:03 a.m., just as Flight 175 hit the South Tower, Flight 93 was climbing to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The pilots received a warning from air traffic control. "Be cautious of any cockpit intrusion. 2 planes have hit the World Trade Center." But the crew remained unaware of the hijackers' presence until 9:28 a.m., when the attackers stormed the cockpit. A struggle broke out. From the ground, controllers monitoring the flight heard terrified screams coming from the cockpit. The voice of First Officer Homer could be heard yelling, "Mayday! Mayday! Get out of here!" Hearing the distress call, a flight coordinator on the West Coast immediately alerted FAA Command Center in Virginia. The hijackers forced Homer out of the cockpit and into the cabin. The other two terrorists herded passengers to the back of the plane to reduce resistance. At 9:31 a.m., Ziad Jarrah used the intercom to deliver a fake message to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. Please remain seated. We have a bomb on board." But he pressed the wrong button, broadcasting the message to ground control instead. 9:39 a.m., just 2 minutes after Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. Jarrah continued, "We are returning to the airport. Please stay quiet." But by then, word of the attacks had reached the passengers and crew. They knew they were on a suicide mission. More than 37 phone calls were made from the aircraft. Last messages to family, loved ones, and 911. A quiet consensus emerged among the passengers. "We must take the plane back. We cannot let them succeed." 9:52 a.m. Someone shouted the rallying cry, "Are you ready? Let's roll!" They used food carts as battering rams and stormed the cockpit. A violent struggle erupted. Jarrah, in a panic, manually jerked the aircraft around, trying to destabilize the uprising. The plane rocked violently in the air. He aimed the aircraft toward Washington, D.C., but began losing control. 10:01 a.m., realizing that his fellow hijackers had failed and passengers were breaching the cockpit, Jarrah made his decision. He would crash the plane. 10:02:17, the attackers were likely fighting to keep control. 10:02:33, Arabic shouting filled the cockpit. "Give it to me! Give it to me!" Moments later, Jarrah pushed the control column forward, sending the plane into a nosedive. At 10:03:06 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashed into a deserted field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. All 44 people on board were killed. The 9/11 attacks claimed 2,996 lives and injured over 6,000 people. Only later did the world learn that the U.S. Capitol building, the seat of Congress, was Flight 93's intended target. If it hadn't been for the bravery and sacrifice of the passengers, the destruction and death toll could have been even greater. Conspiracy theories and public doubts. For over 20 years, the 9/11 attacks have remained the subject of countless books, articles, and films. But despite the official reports, many questions and doubts persist. Some believe that the attacks were used as a pretext to launch the Iraq War 2 years later. 3 major points of skepticism include: 1. NORAD's delayed response. Despite emergency calls and confirmed hijackings, the North American Aerospace Defense Command did not respond quickly. 2. The Pentagon impact hole. Critics argue that the damage to the Pentagon was too small for a Boeing 757, leading to speculation of a different cause. 3. Suspicious stock trades. Investigators discovered that unusually high volumes of put options, bets that a stock would fall, were placed on American and United Airlines shortly before the attacks, suggesting insider knowledge. According to a 2006 survey, over 1/3 of Americans believed federal officials either knew about the attacks in advance or allowed them to happen in order to justify U.S. military action in the Middle East. And what about you? What's your opinion on all of this? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next one.